Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2024 FedEx St. Jude Data Dive Show. We have a lot to cover. We're going to look at last year's leaderboard pretty extensively, figure out how the top 70 played at TPC Southwind last year. We're going to take a look at some prior course performance, maybe back to when it was the regular FedEx St. Jude Classic. We have a forecast to look at. The GCSAA tournament fact sheet came out today, so a lot to cover. Let's not waste any time. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from FantasyNational.com. It is the best golf analytic tool out there for your money. It's going to make you a much smarter golf gambler and a much better golf DFS player. Go check out FantasyNational.com. You will not regret it. In the description to the video, there are links to all of the social media. First off, my X and Instagram, where normally I post research every Monday afternoon regarding previous winners of the tournament that is being played that week, some patterns and players that fit that criteria. However, did not do that for the St. Jude as the way I collect historical data. I only have 1 year of data to work with since the St. Jude moved to being the first playoff event in this new format of the top 70. We only had 1 year to look at in that format. So no prior research posted today, but generally on the PGA Tour, if you want to see the weekly research that I do, give me a follow at your preferred social media site. X is also where I place my weekly betting cards and top player usage in the DFS contest I play. That comes out every Wednesday evening after Calls, and the DFS Tactics show. So if you want to see those pieces of information, give me a follow over at X. Lastly, for social media, Gabe's handle is in the description. He writes a great article called The Fringe. It's a wonderful way to start your week of preparation. He continues to update you throughout the week with his own version of recent form and course history. And if you are a subscriber to his article, which is free to do, you're going to be able to join us in his Substack chat every Wednesday night as we continue the DFS talk over there. We talk about game theory, favorite areas of the price board, players that we are pivoting to, players that we are fading, maybe closing our eyes and praying that they don't play well, fading, scary fades as we call it. But it's a lot of fun, a lot of interaction, a lot of information being passed out every Wednesday evening over there. You really are missing out if you are not subscribed to his article and able to join us. So make sure you are doing that. Go follow him over on social media, show him some support as well. Finally, we are live. Chat is open. I want to hear from you all. Have you made any wagers for the St. Jude when the odds came out earlier this morning? Who are you targeting early on in your week of preparation? How do you think the course is going to play? How much do you know of TPC Southwind in general? So feel free to jump in chat. I see a couple of you down there already. I'll get to you when the intro is over, but feel free to jump in chat, join the discussion this evening, or jump into the comments if you are not able to catch the show live. But let's get into it, shall we? So let's dig into the weeds of the data for the 2024 FedEx St. Jude. And we are going to start normally what we do on a Sunday evening, but the GCSAA tournament fact sheet was not out, and it came out earlier today. Hey, good evening, Darnell. How you doing? Thanks for jumping in chat this evening. It's good to see you as always. I know you were here last night as well. So we'll definitely be digging much more into the data this evening. Going to have some interesting things to talk about, I believe. But it's good to see you this evening. Like Horschel and Davis Thompson outright. Horschel makes a lot of sense. Bermuda, Billy, and all that. Davis Thompson's kind of interesting. I don't know his number off the top of my head. I to be quite frank, I just haven't had the chance to look at the odds boards today, so I'm sure I'm not going to get the best numbers, but I'll be really digging into it tomorrow. But I do like Horschel off the top. We'll have to see what he did when it was a regular full field event. Will be interesting to see that, but good to see you this evening. We are going to check the updated GCSAA tournament fact sheet. I'm going to tell you nothing really changed in terms of all of the important stuff. Obviously, this is a Ron Pritchard design. Now, thanks to Gabe, he has let me know that, or at least he put in his article, that there was a minor renovation a few years ago, lengthening the course, kind of adding some tees and whatnot. But at least in terms of a GCSAA tournament fact sheet, no extensive renovations or restorations have been done to TPC Southwind. The yardage is still listed the same, 7,243 yards, so just over that boundary of what we consider a short course. Of course, still a par of 70, 2 par 5s, 3 par 4s. Green size, 4,300, just like last night, 11 holes with water in play. This acres of fairway might be a tad bit deceiving, as down here at the very, very bottom, and I don't think I'm going to be able to swivel out of the way for you all, average landing areas in the fairways are about 25 yards wide. Now that is still fairly narrow, but not as narrow as what this number would have insinuated from last night. Although I do know there is some rolling terrain and undulations and a little bit of sloping throughout the course at TPC Southwind. So these fairways will still be difficult to hit. They are a tad bit wider than the narrow strips of fairway that I might have insinuated last night. But otherwise, everything else is exactly the same. We are still on Champion Bermuda, cut very, very low. They are generally fast. As we saw last night in the historic conditions, we are on Zoysia in the fairways and the rough, listed at 3 inches long. It's normally listed at 2.5, so they're letting it grow. They're letting the rough grow out a little bit, it seems, for the St. Jude this year. But there is a look, as promised last night when the GCSAA tournament fact sheet came out. I would make sure to bring that up. So now we'll move to our regular starting Monday evening and take a look at the forecast, at least an extended forecast for Memphis, Tennessee and TPC Southwind. You see it's going to be very, very hot. High of near 100 on Thursday, 100 in terms of a high temperature on Friday, eclipsing 100 on Saturday. So it looks like it's going to be another brutally hot week in Memphis, akin to last year when Lucas Glover was just drenched when he was winning the tournament last year. There is a chance of rain a little bit before the tournament on Wednesday, and it looks like there might be a thunderstorm that could move in on Friday. But there looks to be a little bit of wind in terms of a forecast, at least this far out from the start of the tournament. So we'll obviously want to keep an eye on the forecast this week in terms of wanting to focus on players who might be better in the wind and whatnot. But it does look like there is a decent amount of wind in the forecast. And of course, no super forecast for tournament play just yet. So with that, we'll move to Fantasy National, and I can confirm that this is the correct top 70. I know there were a few players last night that had that were still listed, considering they were still top 70 going into the Wyndham week. This is the correct top 70 that has been loaded into Fantasy National. So because we are coming off of the forecast that we just saw, let's take a look at moderate and windy conditions. Again, most of this would be considered moderate based on that forecast that we just saw, but this is the Midwest. Pop-up storms happen. I can attest to that living in the Midwest. So in the past couple of years, in moderate and windy conditions, our top performers have been Scotty, Victor Hovland, Patrick Cantlay, Xander, Wyndham Clark, Jordan Spieth, Rory, Corey Connors, Denny McCarthy, and Adam Scott. Those are your top performers in the wind the past couple of years, or 36 rounds. The other side of that coin, players who have not been as good in the wind, EVR, Tom Hoagie, Tom Kim, although this is, I say this all the time, this is a little bit misleading, as Tom Kim has played very well in the windiest of conditions. It's actually in the moderate he's been pretty bad. So take that how you will. Seamus Power, Bobby Mack. It's only 2 rounds listed in Fantasy National, so be very mindful of that. Tyler Pendrith, Billy Horschel, Davis Thompson, Mackenzie Hughes, so on down. Those are your worst performers of the wind the past couple of years. Okay, let's do a couple of things here really quickly. Just kind of a review, if you will. Not going to do anything with the scoring filter. We took a quick look at this last night. It played really easy last year. And if I had to guess, it's probably going to play easy again. But I'm just not confident in that until we get 2 straight years of every single round being easy. Now, this is the top 70 like it was last year, so you could make that argument. But before last year, it was more of an average difficulty tournament. You see in 2022, it played 3 rounds of average and a round of easy. If we take a look at the WGC St. Jude, even as a WGC with some of the top players in the world, we were still looking at, several rounds of easy and then a difficult, but mostly rounds of average. And I do not like using that average difficulty filter. So we're not going to do anything in terms of this filter as of now unless we get a significant change in the forecast where the wind completely disappears, or if we see the wind really pick up, that might sway us one way or the other to think about more easy or more difficult. So instead, we're also not gonna really look at there's nothing to do with architect. Not gonna really look at anything with course length either. This is over that boundary of 7,200 yards. Not to mention it is a par 70, so this is actually a mid-length par 70 in terms of PGA Tour. So we're not going to use this short course filter or anything. So instead, anything that we were going to do or take a big look at was going to be strokes gained. So yeah, let's just go ahead and get into last year's leaderboard. We're going to take a look at this pretty extensively since this is really the only year of data I am really considering. I don't think it would be incorrect to look at the WGC leaderboards perhaps. But again, a different type of setup. No cut event, but different kind of setup since this is the FedEx Cup playoffs. And then going back to the FedEx St. Jude Classic back in 2018, I believe, maybe 2017. I think that's just too far back to go in terms of statistics. So we're really just kind of going to hammer this tonight and see how it played last year for the players that made the top 70. So looking at last year's leaderboard, we'll just highlight the top 12 here just due to time. Actually, you know what? Let's go to the top 15. Nice round number and inclusive of all the ties. A couple players negative off the tee. Few players negative in approach, which is a little bit surprising, but I want you to focus on the extreme upper portion here. And don't get carried away by seeing some of the smaller numbers. Remember, there was only 70 players in the field last year, so 2.5 is still pretty darn strong. Rory at 4.7 is excellent in terms of in a 70-man field. Several players negative in around the green. Only 2 players negative in putting, and they are minuscule putting or negative in putting. I mean, Cameron Davis was by percentage points. I mean, just thousandths of points rounded to 0. And then Sungjae was 0.2. If we sort on each of the main strokes gained shot types, of course, we're not going to be dealing with any missed cuts from last year, but off the tee isn't necessarily as strong. I mean, Sam Stevens and Ben on 37th out of 70, that is less than half. That is worse than half the field. Yes, you have a 3rd and a 6th for Max Homa, but Norman didn't play well. Cameron Young was, pretty average last year. So off the tee was not terribly correlating. If we look at approach, these 3 weren't. It was a little bit stronger below them, but really nothing too correlating either. last year in terms of approach. Around the green has been the strongest so far with a second, a sixth. Your winner was pretty high and around the green in the sixth, but again, you had some pretty dismal performances also littering the top of that leaderboard, or at least the strokes gained around the green leaderboard. And then putting, probably the best correlation at the extreme top. So kind of all over the place, to be honest with you. And that's why I don't like putting a whole lot of emphasis into 1 year data, but considering the formatting change, it's kind of where we're at now. If we really want to kind of zoom in on this, let's see. We take a look here. Putting is going to be a decent factor, I would think. These greens have some sloping to them, but they, at least from Gabe, these appear to be some of the easiest greens from inside 5 feet, and I think from 5 to 15 they were, pretty easy, or rated pretty easy. So I would think some putting we were going to want to look at. We're definitely not going to want to ignore the iron play with these greens being so small. Iron play is going to be pretty paramount. So we might take a look at all 4 of these strokes gained in different views. We'll start with off the tee. Let's take a look at off the tee. I'm going to check the historic conditions here. Hitting fairways, easy, average, and then difficult. If we go to the WGC St. Jude, fairways, again, easy, average, difficult. Average, some difficult down here. But do remember that some players are clubbing down and still missing fairways. These fairways are still pretty narrow. They are a little bit wider than what I thought from last night, but they are still pretty narrow. These fairways aren't very forgiving. And it's going to be pretty important to be in the fairway, as we'll talk about when we go into the good drives and fairways and greens and whatnot. I'm going to use a different filter this week when I'm looking at that. So let's take a look at off the tee and using the fairways difficult to hit. I know there weren't many rounds listed as difficult to hit, but these fairways can be difficult to hit at times, even with players clubbing down throughout the course. So when fairways have been difficult to hit the past couple of years, our top off the tee players have been Scotty, Rory, Victor Hovland, Ludwig Aubert, Corey Connors, Xander, Colin Morikawa, Patrick Cantlay, Cam Young, and Min Woo Lee. Another way we can maybe look at this, because I do think the rough is going to play to average, even though they did lengthen it per the GCSA tournament fact sheet. We could also take a look at maybe some par 70 metrics throughout the evening. I don't know how much that's going to really matter on off the tee. I would think maybe scoring metrics with the par 70 filter, maybe thinking birdies, bogey avoidance on par 70s, things of that nature, to where I'm thinking more so for that. So if you did not want or did not like the idea of the fairways difficult to hit filter being applied, then we'll bring this into the past 3 months. Your top off the tee players in form right now in the last 24 rounds: Rory, Min Woo Lee, Johnny Vegas, of course, with his win at the 3M, Victor Hovland, Colin Morikawa, Scotty, Tom Kim, Xander, EVR, and Jordan Spieth are your top 10 off the tee players in form right now. We definitely took a look at this last night. I don't know why I cleared that, because I'm actually using these same exact filters. Let's take a look at approach. We're definitely not going to want to ignore this. So, in the past 3 months, or 24 rounds, your top approach players have been Scotty, Tony Finau, Xander, Ben Griffin, Colin Morikawa, Corey Connors, Tom Hoge, Brian Harman, Rory, and Sepp Straka. So make sure you give these players a decent amount of consideration as you move forward this week, as I do think iron play is going to be pretty paramount this week. Don't want to ignore the around the green at all. These greens are small. They're going to get missed fair share of everybody is going to miss their fair share of greens. So we can take a look at this around the green. We'll do around the green in the immediacy right now. Again, I just don't like the average difficult to par. We could maybe look at around the green with Bermuda greens, maybe. But anyway, your top performers around the green the past 24 rounds or 3 months. Davis Thompson, very good on your shout at the beginning of the show there, Darnell. So Davis Thompson, number 1 around the green with Hideki. Rory, Matt McNeely, Nick Taylor, Colin Morikawa, Sam Burns, Seabez, Christian Bezadenhout, Sung Jae, Tony Finau, and Justin Thomas. And then, of course, we're absolutely going to look at some putting. So we'll first just take a look at fast Bermuda. And then we'll get a little bit more specific. But pretty safe to say we're going to be on some fast speed greens here at TPC Southwind. 7 of the past 8 have been fast. If we go to when it was the WGC, all of those rounds were fast. So definitely at least fast. I could envision them being lightning if the rain does not come. It really gets baked out considering how hot it's supposed to be this week down in Memphis. But your top putters on fast Bermuda greens in the past, let's clear that because we definitely want to expand our data size here since we are filtering it. So in the last 2 years or 36 rounds on fast Bermuda greens, let Fantasy National catch up, your top putters have been Wyndham Clark, Alex Noren, Brendan Todd, Taylor Moore, Russell Henley, Billy Horschel, Matt McNeely, Sam Burns, Denny McCarthy, and Sahith Tagala. Those are your top 10 putters on fast Bermuda. Now, if you want to get a little bit more specific, just like last week, we are on Champion Bermuda. And there are 3 courses on the PGA Tour that have Champion Bermuda. So we'll filter for those courses. The first is the Country Club of Jackson, which is the host of the Sanderson Farms, Sedgefield, where we were last week at the Wyndham, and of course where we are this week, TPC Southwind. Those are the 3 courses that have Champion Bermuda listed. Some other courses might, but I won't know that for sure because some GCSA term of fact sheets just list greens as Bermuda, not a specific subtype. So on specifically Champion Bermuda, in the past 2 years, your top putters have been Thomas Dietrich, Tom Kim, Alex Noren, Seabez, Christian Bezadenhout, Eric Cole, Brendan Todd, Billy Horschel. Again, another shout there to Darnell for 2 players that he seems to like this week in terms of outrights. Ben Griffin, Taylor Moore, Tommy Fleetwood, and Sung Jae. Of course, Bermuda Billy, cannot ignore that. A little surprised not to see Sam Burns up here, considering his performance at the Country Club of Jackson, winning that. But you see, 50th out of 70 here in this field. Last year's FedEx St. Jude was not great. I did putt the Wyndham last year exceptionally well. The Sanderson Farms actually lost several strokes trying to defend his title. Or maybe he did not win in 2022, I don't think. No, Mackenzie Hughes. So has not been as productive on the Champion Bermuda as of late. All right. So with that, I think we're going to clear that. We're going to move to fairways, greens, good drives, and all of that. So we'll take a look at last year's leaderboard. Again, the top 15 here, just due to ties. Distance was a decent little factor for the top 15 last year, especially our top 5. Rory's always going to have the distance. Lucas Glover is not necessarily long. He was slightly positive. Patrick Cantlay, Fleetwood, who is not the longest hitter, was positive in distance. So very good to see that. But I don't want you to ignore the fairways. Look at all of the green and all of the players that are positive in the fairways. Only 2 players negative. You might not gain a whole lot in this, but I think it's pretty clear that you need to be in the fairway to compete here at TPC Southwind. Hitting the greens is fine as well, but I would have thought good drives gained would have been a little bit more, riddled with positive players. It's really in the fairways. It really is in the fairways here. A little bit of distance. I do like the good drives gained, and we're going to use a different filter this week and get a gauge on that. So let's go ahead and take a look at the players in the field this week. For the St. Jude, let's just go into the immediacy here. Last 3 months, distance did look like it was a little bit of a factor. So your top distance players in the past 3 months: Rory, Ben On, Minwoo Lee, Cam Young, Jake Knapp, Grazerman, Wyndham Clark, Vegas, Dunlap, and Burns. I do like the idea, the more I thought about it, going with the fairways difficult to hit for driving distance. So let's take a look at that. When fairways are difficult to hit, your top driving distance players: Rory, Minwoo Lee, Adam Scott, Ludwig Aubert. Oh, sorry, let me get this into the last 2 years. My apologies. So let's try this again. In the last 2 years, when fairways have been difficult to hit, your top driving distance players: Rory, Minwoo Lee, Adam Scott, Ludwig, Wyndham Clark, Ben On, Cam Young, Justin Thomas, who has had pretty good success here around TPC Southwind, Taylor Pendrith, and Sam Burns. So a lot of overlap there, but some new names. Absolutely. Adam Scott rises to 3rd in terms of driving distance when fairways are difficult to hit. Justin Thomas rises into the top 10 when fairways are difficult to hit. Just because I still have that filter selected, we'll take a look at some of these other metrics with that filter. You see the distance and how most players are lacking in terms of the fairways gained as well. Really, it's only Aubert who's, he's elite with the distance and solid with the fairways, being 21st. Cam Young is exactly field average, or right in the middle of this field, 35th out of 70 in terms of fairways gained with an elite amount of distance. So if we look at the other way, your fairways gained players: Aaron Rai, Morikawa, Siwoo, Tom Kim, Brendan Todd, Fleetwood, Hubbard, Henley, Straka, and Brian Harman. None of these players are great in distance. Tommy Fleetwood's the best, and he is still lower than average, being 38th out of 70. Just very quickly, we'll check good drives gained as well when fairways are difficult to hit. Colin Morikawa, Scheffler, Rye, Lowry, Connors, Fleetwood, Siwoo, Davis Thompson, Victor Perry, and Russell Henley. But what I want to do, and all credit here goes to Gabe, and he had mentioned this in his article that came out Sunday, and I really stress it to you that if you are not subscribed to his article, you really are missing out. He has a lot of good information to get you thinking about the course early on in the week. What we're going to do here in terms of looking at these different filters, we're going to use a course filter. The first, let me see if I have this in alphabetical. The first is Colonial, which is the host of the Charles Schwab. Then we have the Plantation course, obviously the start of the PGA Tour season. Kapalua, the Century Tournament Champions. We have Sedgefield last week, host of the Wyndham. We have the Stadium course, which is the main course for the Amex. Now, there are 2 other courses at the Amex, but we wouldn't get data for the Nicklaus Tournament Course or La Quinta Country Club anyway, so it still works here. Stadium Course, the 2 rounds that players would play at the Amex, or only one if they missed the 54-hole cut. But Stadium Course, we have TPC Craig Ranch, the host of the Byron Nelson. Oh gosh, which one is it? I'm going to guess the top one. I could be off with that. I'll double check it. And then Waialae, host of the Sony Open. Let's apply these course filters. All of these courses, come on, work for me. There we go. So we'll have to be cognizant. We'll have to be mindful of how far this data goes back. But these 6 courses have Bermuda Rough, specifically listed Bermuda Rough. Why is that an issue? A lot of times, especially if you listen or watch the TV coverage or listen to SiriusXM, that's how I consume the golf content and watch and listen. A lot of times, the commentators on there will talk about their Bermuda Rough and how you can get some flyer lies, how it can be difficult to play out of if you are not accustomed to playing in Bermuda Rough. So, using these 6 courses that have a listed rough of Bermuda, I want to specifically look at good drives gained, meaning the player is either hitting the fairway or they are still hitting the green from the rough. They're hitting the green in regulation from the rough. Combine that with the fact that these courses have listed Bermuda Rough in the past 36 rounds. So for example, let's check Aaron Rai here. Aaron Rai goes back to 2021. That's a little further back than I would like, but it's not as bad as I could have thought. Like, we don't want to consider anything back. I would say 2020 is probably the furthest we want to go back. Siwoo, 2021, it's fine. I'm trying to find somebody like Billy Horschel who's played a long time. 2020, fine. Not great, but fine. Hubbard, see how far back he goes. 2021. So it looks like this is well within reason in terms of a time frame, because you don't want to go too far back. You would make the data insignificant. So in the past 36 rounds, on courses with Bermuda Rough, your top good drives gained players are Aaron Rai, Corey Connors, Siwoo Kim, Colin Morikawa, Billy Horschel, Chris Kirk, Taylor Moore, Russell Henley, Emiliano Grillo, Mark Hubbard, and Will Zalatoris. I said top 10, top 11 just due to ties with Hubbard and Zalatoris. But again, all credits to this idea goes to Gabe. He had this in his article. I thought that was very, very smart, very, very well thought out in terms of his reasoning for looking at this data split this way, looking at good drives gained in or on courses with Bermuda Rough. So I'll make sure to be in contact with him, either tomorrow or Wednesday. This probably will come into the mixed condition model in some form or fashion. I really liked the idea of looking at good drives gained specifically in Bermuda Rough, because we're wanting to target fairways anyway, but these fairways can be difficult to hit. So why not take a look at the specific rough that we're dealing with and how Bermuda Rough can be challenging if a player is not used to it or accustomed to it. Somebody like Rory, who only has 4 rounds. Now, he's been around the PGA Tour long enough. I'm sure he can, he'll be fine. But maybe, some players that might be based in the, say the Northeast, where Bermuda is much less common. Or somebody like Matthew Pavone, who, has played his fair share of PGA tournaments, but, is not located in the U.S., maybe doesn't have as much experience on Bermuda as some others. So that's why I really liked that idea from Gabe, and I'm just straight stealing it, but I'm trying to give him as much credit as possible because it's deserved. But I really liked that idea when I went through his article this weekend. Okay, with that long explanation out of the way, we can maybe look at greens, but I'm surprised. Like, Lucas Glover was negative in terms of greens gained. You had a few players that were quite negative in terms of greens gained. So, despite the fact that these are small, I don't know how much it really contributed. But when you sort on it, other than Ricky, most of these players performed pretty well. So it does look like greens is going to be some kind of factor as well. So we'll remove that, and we'll go in the recency. In the past 3 months or 24 rounds, your top greens gained players. Of course, Scotty, number 1, Xander, Ludwig Aubert, Rory, Aaron Rai, Victor Hovland, Tommy Fleetwood, Johnny Vegas, Sepp Straka, and Tony Finau. Okay, let's move to scoring. Birdies and bogeys, doubles, although I don't think they're going to play too much of a factor. Birdies and bogeys. I don't think there's going to be very many eagles. There's only 2 par 5s. One's a pretty decent eagle rate, I believe 3%. I'm going to have to cheat, go to the course breakdown. Yeah, 3.1%. The other one is a good birdie opportunity, but not necessarily a lot of eagles. 579-yard par 5 third. So we're going to look at mostly birdies or bogeys here. So if we look at the top 15, more players are positive in the bogey avoidance, which is what you would expect. Generally, your more consistent metric is the bogey avoidance, but generally, and as we see here, the higher raw numbers, there's more to be gained in the birdies gained. Now, our winner looks like he led bogey avoidance. He did, so it's important to note that. Just like we thought last night, Darnell, when we were talking a little bit last night, my first initial inclination would have been bogey avoidance. But I think birdies gained is going to have some too. I mean, third, runner-up, third, sixth. Yeah, top 20 it doesn't sound as great when it's only a 70-man field, but there's still plenty to be gained in the birdies as well. If we sort on the bogeys, first, sixth, kind of falls off though. Kind of falls off. A 43rd from Keith Mitchell, some top 20s a little bit further down. So, I mean, both of them are probably going to have a decent little bit of a percentage in my mixed condition model, or at least a percentage of my mixed condition model. Again, it's what you're wanting to look at. Do you want the consistency of the bogey avoidance, or do you want the spikeability of the birdies gained? In terms of DFS, I would probably lean towards the birdies gained because that's what's going to get you the points. If you're looking for placements, like placement wagers and things of that nature, maybe looking more so bogey avoidance. We're going to take a look at this in a couple of different ways. We'll start with just the immediacy in the past 24 rounds or 3 months. I will look at birdies are better just because there are, eagles do happen on these par 5s. They're not common per se, but they do happen. So your top birdies are better gained players in the past 3 months. Sungjae, Davis Thompson, very good. Rory, Corey Connors, Colin Morikawa, Scotty Scheffler, Matt McNeely, Xander, Tony Finau, Johnny Vegas. You see almost all of these are top 10 also in birdies. You just got a few guys that might be making some eagles every once in a while, like Rory taking advantage of par 5s and whatnot, but there's only 2 here, so again, that's why I'm not going to put a whole lot of emphasis into the birdies or better game. Bogey avoidance, most of these players are also up there as well, but your top bogey avoiders in the past 3 months: Xander, Scotty Scheffler, Rory, Colin Morikawa, Shane Lowry, Russell Henley, Billy Horschel, Hideki, Tony Finau, and Adam Scott. This is and another way I'm going to look at this data, and this kind of coincides with putting a lot of emphasis into par 4s and par 3s. The fact that this is a par 70 with only 2 par 5s, there's not a lot of great opportunities to just score. So let's see who some of the better bogey avoiders, and really kind of more importantly, who are some of the better birdies gained players birdies are better. On par 70s, generally speaking, these are 4 par 3s and 2 par 5s, although you do get the occasional 5 par 3s and 3 par 5s. But on courses that are par 70s in the past 2 years, your top birdies or better gained players have been Victor Hovland, Rory, Colin Morikawa, Scotty Scheffler, Patrick Cantlay, Ludwig Aubert, Russell Henley, Xander, Tom Kim, and Adam Scott. Some of you might be wondering why I am not looking at no-cut events, since that is a filter here in Fantasy National. If we look at no-cut events and we try to sort, say, in the past 2 years, Fantasy National has not updated their I guess it's a flag. I don't want to get too technical, but with this being a large database, I imagine there's a flag or an indicator, if you will, of if a round is a no-cut event. They have not updated that in the past couple of years, so we just don't have the data for that. So that's why I'm not using the filter no-cut event. Although if we did have data from this year and whatnot, it would probably be pretty useful. We just don't have it. But I did definitely want to look at the par 70, particularly the birdies and birdies are better, because scoring is just so hard on par 70s. With that, we'll take a look at proximity. I am interested in this, considering the majority of our approach shots really fall between 150 and 200, especially against the PGA Tour average, or the average course where it plays. You can see that from the graphs. So kind of interested to see how the proximity played last year. Again, top 15. Glover was good from 150 to 175, but not so much in the 175 to 200. I don't see a whole lot here, although this total prox number, even though some of these players are negative, like Taylor Moore is negative 1.4 over 4 rounds. That's essentially field average. Cam Davis was slightly below average by a minuscule amount. So this total prox number isn't terrible, but I don't see a whole lot here. I really don't. If we sort, 6-6 third first starts off fantastic, falls off quite a bit immediately after that. 150 to 175, not great. 52nd, a 43rd, a 52nd, and all of this is in 70-man fields. So, if we were to prorate this to a cut, these guys would miss the cut. 175 to 200, not at all. So I just don't see a whole lot here, other than maybe total prox, and that's stretching it. We'll take a quick look at some of these proximity ranges, but I just don't see a whole lot here. I'm going to look at the total prox. This is the one I think, if I had to choose right now, I would put in the mixed condition model. If I had to choose one, I don't think I would actually put it in the mixed condition model. But your best total prox players the past 3 months: Tom Kim, Scotty Scheffler, Tom Hoge, Victor Hovland, Tony Finau, Hideki Matsuyama, Brian Harman, Russell Henley, Rory, and Adam Hadwin. If you want to go just by the numbers, or by the percentage of shots from a particular range, it would be the 150 to 175. So your top proximity players from 150 to 175: Seamus Power, Nick Dunlap, Matt Fitzpatrick, Ben Griffin, Tony Finau, Max Homa, Brian Harman, Sepp Straka, Taylor Pendrith, Xander, and Harris English. All right, moving right along to 3s, 4s, and 5s. We'll take a look at par 3s. Not a whole lot gained last year, at least, from Lucas Glover. But they were played fairly solidly by the players in the top 15. Really the worst, all of these are just negative 0.7, which, if we look, is just one shot worse than the players that would have been positive. So, okay, a third, a sixth, some middlings in here. Nothing fantastic by any means. Does look like the 175 to 200 would be the range, at least looking at this, and we'll go to Excel here shortly and try to confirm this. But kind of looks like par threes, just in general. If we go to the breakdown just very quickly, we have 2 from 150 to 175, 1 and 1. We have 171. That's the one that's probably pushing more often than not into that 175 to 200, would be my guess. 196, 162, 205. So you could probably see that one coming down to 175 to 200 as well. So your top par 3 performers in the field this week, the past 24 rounds or 3 months: Xander, Bent On, Corey Connors, Colin Morikawa, Henley, Straka, Wyndham Clark, JT, Johnny Vegas, Max Grazerman. We move to par 4s. Played extremely well. As you would expect in a course that's a par 70, you got to take advantage of the par 4s whenever you get a chance. Or at least, salvage your pars on them, because there's not a lot of great scoring opportunities. Not a single player negative in par 4s. I'm a little surprised to see how many players were negative from 400 to 450, to be honest. But 450 to 500 also looks kind of promising. No doubt we'll be looking at some form of par 4s. 450 to 5, like Victor gained a bunch from that range and did not play the others very well at all. 400 to 450. 5th, 6th, 1st, then falls off a cliff, quite literally. Really, the 350 to 4. Look at that. That's fairly solid. And it makes a little bit of sense. Oh, sorry, wrong thing. Makes a little bit of sense. You had the par 4 second at 401, which you can easily see falling under 400 yards when they move pins and tees. This was one of your better scoring opportunities. And then the par 4 15th, also one of your better scoring opportunities on the course. So, okay, that kind of makes some sense now when you start thinking about the layout of the course and where your opportunities to score come in. Okay, I can see it. I'm just going to look at par 4s. We're running a little bit close to time, and we still got to go to Microsoft Excel. So, your top par 4 performers past 3 months: Scotty, Rory, Xander, Colin Morikawa, Sungjae, Russell Henley, Rye, Harmon, Noren, and Lowry. And just to quickly wrap this up, we'll go to par 5s. Not a whole lot to be gained, but top par 5 performers: Davis Thompson, Finau, Horschel, Vegas, Burns, Seamus Power, Eric Cole, Rory, Tommy Fleetwood, J-Day, and Victor Hovland. All right. I'll get this back to the strokes gained. Let's go to Microsoft Excel. I'm going to first start with what I looked at last year. Because we don't have an early look file, we're just going to end off with two of the 3 Microsoft Excel data points that we normally look at. Let's take a look at my mixed condition model from last year, see how well it did, what I looked at, how predictive it was, how results-based, or how good it was results-based. It was okay. It was okay. Scotty didn't perform necessarily very well. Lucas Glover was 13th. Granted, he was on fire at that time, so he was pretty popular. Of the players that are in my top 15 to 20 who were fairly unique, Jordan Spieth was 14th, and he played very, very well. Justin Rose finished it with the top 20. Overall, it's hard to say in terms of how good results-based it is, or it was, with no cut. But it's okay. It's nothing to write home about, but it's okay. I mean, I had the winner inside my top 15, had several top 10s. It's acceptable. Again, you see most of these guys were pretty popular, though, so can't take too much credit. What did I look at? I had 20% in approach. Makes a lot of sense. Maybe a little bit heavy, but makes a lot of sense because you're going to have to hit your irons well to compete around TPC Southwind. 15% in total procs. Again, if I had to guess, that would be the proximity metric I would look at, but 15% is just way too heavy. Way too heavy. So we need to back that off. Par 4s, 15%. Again, makes a whole lot of sense as a par 70. Not a lot of chances to score on par 5, so players are going to have to take advantage of par 4s. Greens, which I like, but fairways difficult to hit. Okay, I would have just probably should have used good drives gained in that case, which I did, but it was only 5%. Just emphasizing the importance of greens because these greens are small. I don't know if I like the metric and filter combination, but I can see what I was trying to get at. 5% in fast Bermuda putting. I'll probably bump this up to 10%, but yeah, we're going to be looking at the same thing essentially. 5% opportunities gained. Okay. I'm not in love with it this week, but okay. Birdies gained. You see, I didn't even look at birdies or better. I only looked at birdies as par 70. So probably going to replicate that. Hopefully that was pretty predictive. We'll see here in a second. Talked about the good drives. I did look at proximity 150 to 175 because it is the most prevalent approach length or proximity length here. Okay, not in love with it. Par 3s, 5%, 5% in the par 5s, and then I only had 5% in the 450 to 5s because I had so much in total par 4s. So how predictive were these? You got to remember, this is a 70-man field. 70-man field. So I'm probably looking at something in the mid-20s. So approach was pretty solid. Proximity was pretty solid. Par 4s was acceptable. Greens was not. And I talked about how I did not like that metric and filter combination. The putting was not very predictive at all, which putting is a very fickle statistic. So maybe a reason why not to bump that up to 10%. I'll have to do some research tomorrow and see how well these players putt, specifically on Champion Bermuda. Let's see, what else here? Opportunities was pretty solid. Birdies gained, I was hoping this would be a little bit better. It wasn't. Okay. Good drives. Off your screen. 32, not great. Proximity 150 to 175 actually was pretty solid. And the rest were, not great. So we definitely have some room for improvement. But I like a lot of what I was thinking. I'm going to be moving some percentages around for sure. I like approach. Might be a little bit heavy there. If I do proximity, clearly it's going to come down. I do like having an extreme amount of weight in par 4s. We'll change this greens gained with the fairways difficult to hit filter. But overall, yeah, I can understand where I was thinking with that, or where my mind was at with that. So we're going to end the show off this evening digging deep into TPC Southwind, specifically from last year. And again, I've mentioned it a couple times. I'll reiterate. I'm only looking at last year because because of the new format, going from a 125-man field to a 70-man playoff event. I'm just looking at last year. So how did TPC Southwind play? You see the off the tee and the around the green, at least for, I think this is still the top 30, was pretty close. Pretty darn close. The approach and the putting were pretty darn close. So that's why I'm thinking we might want to have a little bit of an increase in the importance of putting. But clearly we need to look at putting. Clearly we need to look at approach. Still kind of trying to wrap my head around off the tee. I am pretty confident I'm going to have 5% around the green, just because these greens are small. They're going to get missed, so players are going to have to be good around the green. So pretty confident that I'll at least have 5% there. Moving into distance, fairways, good drives. Like distance was surprising. That's a negative number, even though I mentioned in the prior leaderboards that it looked like distance mattered. For the rest of the top, I guess 30, it didn't at all. Fairways, I know this isn't the largest of numbers, but you got to remember this is only a 70-man field. It's pretty high. I don't know of any course that has fairways even remotely close to the greens number. 1.5, Like some of these smallest greens numbers, so Mayakoba, El Camaleon, when it was still on the PGA Tour, was somewhat close in terms of fairways versus greens. Another short, I believe par 70, maybe par 71. Let's see some other numbers here that might be somewhat close. Most oftentimes, greens are heavily outweighing the fairways. That is not the case here. That's not the case. The fairways are pretty darn close in terms of importance versus hitting the greens. So to see this number, to see this number be so close is striking to me as a statistician. So that's why we're going to have quite a bit of emphasis in fairways this week. And that's also why I wanted to take a look at good drives gained with that Bermuda rough filter to see, for the players who missed the fairways, because they are going to get missed, who can still play out of that Bermuda rough well. Looking at scoring, most of the time birdies gained is the higher number, but look at the bogey avoidance. So just like I had mentioned last night, Darnell, my initial lean was bogey avoidance. It seems to be the correct thing. Although I'm sure we'll look at birdies gained as well, but bogey avoidance. Par 3s, 4s, and 5s. The par 3s, 1.2. Par 4s are a 3, which that's pretty high for a 70-man field. Look at the par 5s. There's just not enough to look at in terms of putting a lot of weight into par 5s. There just isn't. There's only 2 of them. So, again, these players are going to have to be good at these par 4s. And really, it's all 3 of these ranges. All 3 of these ranges. I don't know if I'm comfortable enough to split out looking at 175 to 200 par 3s, because you see they played all different ranges. And it's only half. Like, if it was, you say maybe 0.8 out of 1.2, then there would be a pretty compelling argument to only look at that range. But with it only being half, I'm more inclined just to look at all of the par 3s. And again, par 4s, we're going to be looking at mainly these 3, but just par 4s in general. And then very little par 5s. Let's take a look at proximity just very quickly. Proximity, that's a decent sized number for a 70-man field. 8.6 and a 125 to 150. Okay. But also, as I mentioned, credit goes to Gabe. He also mentioned in his article how these greens, I think, are pretty easy to putt inside 15 feet. The data shows it's inside 10 feet is where most players are gaining a whole bunch. Something to consider. But again, with no early look file, that's going to be in the end of the show. Let me bring you back to Fantasy National and just the kind of strokes gained page view. That's going to be it for the show this evening. I want to thank Darnell for jumping in chat. Thanks to Gabe for providing a lot of great information. Again, some of the things I kind of knew, but he really brought a lot to the forefront in terms of thinking about TPC Southwind analytically and from an analyst perspective of trying to how to attack this course as DFS players and wagerers. So I really want to give him as much credit as I can. I was very, very impressed with his article this week. As I am every week, but especially this week. But thanks to Darnell and thanks to everyone else out there who tunes in, watches, listens, supports the channel by liking the videos, commenting, and subscribing. I always appreciate it. I love what I do. Taking a very in-depth look at golf statistics. I admit masochist level intense data research, but love what I do. Trying to give you all a statistician and data analyst's view of what he sees in terms of numbers and data. Trying to help us all win a little bit of money in the process. Some weeks better than others. We've got quite a bit of momentum here on the channel. It's been a pretty good month, a solid run lately, and we're trying to keep that momentum through the FedEx Cup playoffs. So thanks again for all the support, for all the wagers you've made so far this week for the FedEx St. Jude, for all the wagers you're thinking about making this week for the FedEx St. Jude. And until I see you Wednesday night for the DFS Tactics show, may all your bets be profitable.